Okay, this would be our this would be the relationship. X squared plus y squared is equal to r squared on our unit circle. The radius is 1. So we're going to use that in order to find the other 5 trig values. So you all remember a squared plus b squared equals c squared? This is the same thing. Okay. Now, before we get started, though, we need to figure out, and this is what you should do when you take your quiz on Friday, is we need to figure out where we are. What quadrant are we in? And this is what they told us. They told us that tangent is positive. You see how that's a positive number? So I know that I need to find the quadrant that has a tangent that's positive. And it says sine is less than 0. And if it's less than 0, what does that mean? Negative. So don't say it out loud. I want everybody to think about it. Where are we on the unit circle? Show me with your fingers. What quadrant do you think we're in? Positive tangent, negative sine. Good, quadrant 3. So that's important to establish. We know we're in quadrant 3. And in quadrant 3, the only answers that should be positive are tangent and the sister. Everything else should be negative. Yes.
How did you know that tangent was positive? Well, I know it says it on there, but
Yeah, that's why.
Look it on here. How will we know that? Like, because we can tell when the sine or the cosine is negative or positive, looking at the margin.
So just looking at it, you know that tangent and cotangent, you get that by dividing, right? So any place where sine and cosine are either both positive or sine and cosine are both negative, because a positive divided by a positive is positive, and a negative divided by a negative is positive. Okay, so the reason why I put this up here is because we only know 2 things. And is tangent equal to x over y or y over x? Y over x. So what we know in this scenario is that y is 1 and x is 2. Because that's the fraction that they gave us. Okay, so now what we need to do is find r. So I know that r is going to be 1 squared plus 2 squared, and that's going to equal r squared. So that's why I recommend we start off by finding r. That way we can find all of our ratios that you should have. You should have this glued down. So what is 1 squared plus 2 squared? 1 squared is 2 squared is, and 1 plus 4 is 5. And we don't have to simplify that. We just know that the square root of 5 is equal to r. So now we have all 3 sides of our triangle. So we can find them all. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you glued something down and it tells you your trig ratios, where it'll tell you, and I'll write it off. I'll write it over here, but I'm pretty sure it's in one of the things you glue down, where you should have that tangent.
Oh, yeah, the sine.
Yes. And what does it say? Does it say sine is? Yeah. So sine is y over r. Cosine is x over r. And then we know that cosine is x over r. The sister, which is secant. Oh, I didn't mean to say cosine. I'm so sorry. Cosecant. Hold on, let me back up. I'm so sorry. So cosecant is r over y. Secant is r over x. And then we know tangent is y over x, and cotangent is x over y. So now that we have all three sides, we can actually find all six of, we can find the other 5. Because we figured out that on this particular triangle, we know that x equals 2, y equals 1, and r equals the square root of 5. So we're going to use those 3 sides to answer all 6.
And will we need to memorize those rules?
Yeah, you should kind of know those. Yeah. Yeah, because we know that r is 1. So sine is y over 1. Cosine is x over 1, which is x. And then you take the reciprocals. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So we already know tangent. So the easiest thing to find would be the cotangent of theta. And what do you think the cotangent is going to be? 2. Now let's find the cosine. Cosine is equal to x over r. So what did we say x was? Look in here. What is x? 2. What's r? Square root of 5. We got to rationalize that. So let's do that. And we're going to get 2 root 5 over 5. Now, I normally at the end, I go back and put my positive and negatives. So now we're going to find the sister. The sister to cosine would be secant. And that's just going to be root 5 over 2. We don't need to rationalize that. That's my answer. And then we're going to find our sine. Sine is going to be y over r, which would be 1 over root 5. We have to rationalize that. And we get root 5 over 5. And then we know that cosecant, well, that's just root 5 over 1, or just root 5. So now we have the other 5. But there's a problem. The problem is, one second. The problem is we're in quadrant 3. We already established that from the beginning. And the only thing positive in quadrant 3 is what? What did I say would be positive in this quadrant? Tangent and what else? Cotangent. So the other 4 have to be what? Negative. So the last thing I'm going to do is go back and put a negative with all of these. So this is negative. This is negative. This is negative. And that is negative. And we're going to leave the cotangent positive because that's the only thing positive in quadrant 3. Jaden first. Jaden had a question. Daniel.
So tangent and cotangent go with each other. That's why it's considered both positive.
Right.
Cosecant would be negative in quadrant 3.
Right. Any questions? So that would be, this is an example of one of your test questions. They gave us 1, and with a little bit of work, we were able to find the other 5. All right, next example. Go ahead and copy this down. Now this one already told us what quadrant we're in, so we don't need to figure that out. It's telling us we're in quadrant 3. So using x, y, and r, what did we say sine was equal to? What over what? Y over what? Yeah. So sine is y over r. So that told us in this example, they gave us the y. And they gave us r. And what are we missing? X. We have to find x. So keeping in mind that it's always x squared plus y squared equals r squared. That means I have x squared plus negative 5 squared equals 13 squared. So you don't get a calculator, but hopefully you know these perfect squares. And you may already know the answer because this is a Pythagorean triple. Who remembers the Pythagorean triples from geometry? Okay, one person. So you already know what my answer is going to be. If not, let's go ahead and work through it. All right, so what is 5 squared? 25. Does anybody know what 13 squared is? 169, good. So let's subtract 25 from both sides. So x squared equals 144. And now, who knows what the square root of 144 is? 12. So we have all three of our sides. So I know that this is what I'm going to use. I'm going to use x equals 12, y equals 5, and we can kind of ignore that negative. The main thing that is to tell us what quadrant we're in. And we know that r is 13. And in quadrant 3, what's positive in quadrant 3? What's the only thing that's going to be positive in quadrant 3? Which two? Tangent and cotangent. So we just know that tangent and cotangent are positive. And this is actually one of the easy ones because we don't have any radicals. All of them are just whole numbers. So we can just write our fractions. We don't need to worry about rationalizing because we have 12, 5, and 13. All right, so let's go ahead and find the other 5. So we're in quadrant 3. So the next thing I would find would be our, what's the sign? What is the sister to sine? Cosecant. So the cosecant of theta will be negative 13 over 5. Again, we know we're in quadrant 3, so cosecant is negative. So then the next thing, what do you want to find next? So we got cosine. Okay, let's find cosine. So cosine of theta is x over r. So x is 12 and r is 13, so that would be 12 over 13. Is it going to be positive or negative? Negative, because we're in quadrant 3. So now we'll do the sister to cosine, which is secant. And that's going to be negative 13 over 12. All right, the last two we have are the positives, which is tangent. Tangent is y over x. So what would be my answer? What is y over x? 5 over 12, that's positive because we're in Q3. And then cotangent would be what? 12 over 5. And that would be all 5 of your answers. So when we only give you one ratio, you will have to find the missing side. Any questions? Yes.
Convert negative 5 to positive 2.
So because in quadrant 3, so we're using that to figure out the missing side, but we just have to realize in what quadrant what is positive and what's negative. Yeah. All right, I think we only have one more. Oh, 2 more. All right, go ahead and copy this down. And the other one we've actually already covered. So we're good. We'll call this will be it for us. First thing we need to figure out is where are we on the unit circle. So don't say it out loud. But we have to figure out where we are. In what quadrant is secant going to be positive and sine negative? So I'm gonna give you a minute to think about it, and then I'm gonna ask for you all to show me. And think about that. Secant is whose sister? Cosine. So in what quadrant is cosine positive and sine negative? So I'm gonna give you all a minute, and then I'm gonna ask you all to show me with your fingers where we are. Nothing's negative in quadrant 1 though. So let's all agree we're not in 1. So, because sine is negative. All right, so show me with your fingers, where are we? Yep, we're in 4, good job. So we're in quadrant 4. And here, the only positives that we're going to have, the only positives of our answers are going to be our secant and our cosine. Everything else, the other 4 has to be negative. All right, so secant, this is just 2, but every whole number can be written as a fraction. So what is secant? Is secant r over x or r over y? Yeah, because secant is the sister of cosine, right? And cosine is x. So this is our r and our x. So let's find y. So we know r squared equals x squared plus y squared. So 2 squared equals 1 squared plus y squared. Let's go ahead and solve that. 4 equals 1 plus y squared. Subtract 1. 3 equals y squared, which means that the square root of 3 is equal to y. So unfortunately, one of our sides is a radical, and we will have to rationalize some of them. So we know that for this triangle, we're using root 3 for y. We're using 1 for x, and we're using 2 for r. These are the 3 sides that we're going to use to find our ratios. All right, so let's hit it. So we'll start off with cosine. Cosine of theta is going to be 1 over 2 because we just flipped secant. Sine of theta is y over r. So that would be root 3 over 2. The sister is cosecant. And again, I put my negatives at the end. That's going to give us 2 over root 3. Go ahead and rationalize that though. You got to multiply that one top and bottom. All right, so the last 2 would be tangent. Tangent of theta is y over x. So that would be root 3 over 1, or just root 3. Cotangent of theta is 1 over root 3. We have to rationalize that too. And then the last thing I would do is go back and make everything negative except for this first one. This is the only one that can stay positive because we're in quadrant 4. So everything else we need to put a negative with. So this gets a negative, this gets a negative, this gets a negative, and that gets a negative. And that is it. Okay, so my recommendation is that you use this time to start on that study guide. If I had to pick between homework and study guide, I would pick study guide. Because homework is 20%, tests are 80%, right? So I'm not really worried about a 0 out of 10. That's not, but not doing well on the quiz, that's kind of a big deal, right? Because that's in our 80% category. So use this time to start working on your study guide or homework 3. You all have extra time because, you know, this class is longest. And then the answer key is already posted. So either you're working on the study guide or you're going to work on homework